Welcome to Fast Talk, the Velo News podcast and everything you need to know to ride like a pro.
Hello again and welcome to Fast Talk. I'm your host, Chris Case. Today we have a great episode in store for you with someone you've heard from many times before on Fast Talk. We're finally joined today by Brent Bookwalter of the Michelin-Scott WorldTour team, a man of both wisdom and humility, for a full conversation for the first time on balancing life and sport. What do pros know about that balance, you ask? They're pampered. You're probably thinking, well, it's not exactly true. The life of a pro cyclist is not as glamorous as you might think. We'll discuss that misconception first, but we'll spend the majority of our conversation today learning the many ways in which Brent has learned to balance training and racing with being a good husband, a soon-to-be father, being a good son, a good friend, a good family member, being a Gran Fondo promoter, among many other things. Through the years of racing, both at the Neo-Pro level through to the World Tour, Brent has dealt with limited time. Sometimes he's done it well, sometimes he's done it not so well. But in any case, he has been forced to learn how to prioritize his life in myriad ways. And it's those tips that apply to all of us. The high level of physical and mental performance that is demanded of pro athletes, especially at the World Tour level, while they also strive to maintain healthy relationships and interests outside of their career, well, it just means that they have been forced to master life balance. And that's why Brent is such a great guest for our episode today. While we all don't deal with the issues related to pro cyclists in our own lives, there are common themes about self-care, spending time in relationships, knowing your personal limits, and working to keep your passions alive that we can all relate to. Today, along with Mr. Bookwalter, we spoke to longtime pro and coach Katie Compton, as well as two of our favorite coaches and soon-to-be Fast Labs podcast hosts, Grant Holicky and Colby Pearce. If you didn't catch it last week, we released our first bonus episode. That's right, Fast Talk is now a weekly podcast. Coach Connor and I were able to answer a few of your questions, one related to overtraining and burnout, not interchangeable terms, thank you, Dr. Seiler, for the correction, and one related to physiological testing. If you have a question for us, you can either write to us at fasttalk@fastlabs.com, or, as you may have heard by now, we have a number set up for you to call, 719-800-2112. Leave a voicemail with your question. If we can hear you loud and clear in the message, we may include the recording in the show. Now, bust out your balance board, brush up on your communication skills, get ready to compartmentalize. Let's make you fast. We're excited to have Brent Bookwalter on the show today, and we're just as excited to tell everyone out there about the Bookwalter Binge Gran Fondo, studded with racing on timed segments on tough climbs that provide an epic challenge to all. It's a perfect way to celebrate the end of the professional cycling race season by riding the routes Brent used for training earlier in the year. It's a bonus that the event requires travel to the beautiful cycling destination of Asheville, North Carolina, where you will ride in autumn colors, enjoy some of the world's best craft beers. Saturday, October 31st is the date. Visit bookwalterbinge.com and sign up for email updates so you'll receive first dibs on registration when it comes open April 1st. Ready to take your training and racing to the next level? We're proud to introduce the Fast Labs Performance Experience training camps. Combining our devotion to science with our passion for sport, we've developed a world-class experience modeled after World Tour team camps, the likes of which are typically reserved for the most elite cyclists. Now, bringing it to you, to help you gain a better understanding of the science of human performance. In partnership with the incredible staff at the University of Colorado Sports Medicine and Performance Center, we'll guide you through pro-caliber physiological testing, biomechanical analysis, and nutritional assessment. Throughout the camp, leading experts in sports science will present on the latest developments in their fields. Oh, and you'll also get to ride on the gorgeous mountain roads of Boulder with Coach Trevor Connor and myself. Check out fastlabs.com, enter FastLabs2020 as the discount code, and receive $500 off a purchase at this performance experience training camp. it bears mentioning the fact that Brent has been a longtime contributor to Fast Talk. He's been on this show in many, many episodes, but he has never been our primary guest. And today, finally, after all of these years, Brent Bookwalter joins us for a full episode of Fast Talk. Welcome, Brent.
Thanks for having me, guys. I've enjoyed the brief appearances in the past, and hope this one can be a good one too.
Yeah, so Brent, we've been really excited to finally get you on the show as our primary guest. You have shared a whole lot of wisdoms with us over the years. You have given us, or me, some of my favorite quotes of all time that I share with my athletes. Tell them, listen to this. This is actually some good words of wisdom. So really looking forward to talking to you about this. And this is a bit of not just a training episode, but let's talk about life and balance. And so I'm just going to start it off by saying something that I hear a lot from athletes I coach is this: well, I'm not a pro. I've got a family and a job, so I don't have the time to train all the time. Having worked with a lot of pros, having known a lot of pros, I would say that's not really an accurate quote. Would you agree?
Yeah, I would agree with that. We are in a privileged, very exceptional circumstance of having performance and competition as a huge part of our lives, and often, one of the highest priorities up there. But I don't know any of my pro peers that, truly leave that as all they do. Most of us are husbands or fathers or boyfriends or brothers or sons and friends, and have a lot of other irons in the fire. And sometimes it takes a bit of a village, just like we would have in pursuing our athletic excellence, just to keep us alive and going and doing those everyday, day-to-day life things that everyone else is obviously dealing with too.
Yeah, I think that's one of the misnomers of professional life, is that it's an entirely pampered life, but that's not really the case. And the World Tour is one level. Domestic racing is another level, and those can be considerably different. But I would say, fill us in or correct me if I'm wrong, but even at the World Tour level, you're having to manage a lot of stuff when you're on the road, the logistics, finding housing in Europe. We're going to get into a lot of this stuff, but the list goes on and on of those things that you're having to deal with outside of, taking care of your body, preparing for training, preparing for racing. There's a lot going on.
Yeah, there is, most definitely. And you're right. We are at the highest level of the sport in the World Tour. Most of us have incredible access to resources and support, and we do go through periods of our seasons where we are babied and nurtured and taken care of, and every minute of every day is outlined for us, and it's just plug and play. We show up and get after it. Someone looks after us every step of the way. On the opposite side of that is, since those days and those periods are so looked after and so micromanaged and so far removed from, quote, normal life, that sort of normal life outside of the sport and outside of competition does get neglected. And that requires a need and attention and a deserved focus when we come back to that is maybe even higher than if we had been just sort of in and out of that through a whole week or through a whole month or through a whole year. So no matter who you are, it's important to find that balance is a maybe elusive goal or dream, but balance of family and balance with other work, balance with some travel, and just keeping that sort of a holistic, all-encompassing outlook on everything that is part of life.
Yeah, what I wanted to bring up, you just mentioned and talked about what it's like at the highest level and all the challenges there that you have to face. I've worked a lot with aspiring pros or neo pros who are just getting into it. These are the people that are either making nothing or starting wage for a domestic pro is in the $5,000 to $6,000 per year range, which you obviously can't live on. So the other side of this for pros at lower level or new pros is they still do have to work a job, yet they still have to be able to perform. They have to be able to go to the races and show themselves. So they have to train those 20 to 25 hours per week. They have to find the time to rest. And completely exhausted from all their training, they still have to find that ability to go to work, get their job done. Many of them will have boyfriends or girlfriends that they have to come home to. It can actually be very, very hard to balance all that. And Brent, I'm sure you went through that phase as well.
Yeah, I definitely did. Yeah, I went through, I guess I took sort of the collegiate development path, where after high school, I wasn't quite ready to go all in for cycling, and still valued the idea of getting a bit of an education and growing as a person and as an academic a little bit, but definitely still wanted to grow as a cyclist. And I was very fortunate to have parents who were very supportive and did help me through school, but that didn't mean I also wasn't working odd jobs at different times of the year and trying to balance school and some extra income and my training all together. And really, I feel really grateful that, as much of a challenge as it was at the time, that I had that opportunity that did sort of spread me thin, and it did balance me out, and it gave me an appreciation for time management. It really cemented my love for the bike, because I didn't take that time for granted. I didn't just have hours and hours on end that I could just meander around the countryside. I had to really keep it focused. And then even that little bit of perspective of being in a bit of an academic environment, or a bit of a normal, work environment, working seasonal jobs where I was with other people who were out of the cycling world completely. So I think, in hindsight, as much as I would have loved not to have had those split priorities at the time, it served me well in my development and provided some perspective. And these days, when I am able to go through these parts of the year, days, weeks, and months of the year where I am, solely focused on training, I appreciate it all the more, and try to really make the most of it.
Yeah, I mean, I can tell you one of the things that I noticed working with those athletes, and you're kind of touching on here, is pros are kind of this contradiction that to be a top level pro, you have to be remarkably tough. I mean, you have to go into these killer races. You can be absolutely exhausted. You can be injured, and your team manager doesn't have a ton of sympathy and says, no, get in there, go do your job. So on the one hand, you have to be really tough, but on the other side, there's almost this fragility that I've seen in pros. And to give you an example, when I was racing full time, I used to love to go and visit my nephews and nieces. And unfortunately, they were at that age where they thought giving me wet willies was incredibly funny. They thought it was funny. I did not, because that could ruin a spring season. If I came back from a really hard 6-hour ride and they shoved a wet finger in my ear, I could be coughing within a few days. So I have seen, working with a lot of high level athletes, that there is this fragility, it's really easy to fall apart with how hard you're training, with how much you're trying to balance. And actually, the training side of it's pretty easy, figuring out what to do. You have a coach who tells you, that gives you the interval work, tells you what to do every day. What I've seen take more athletes apart is more not be able to figure out that balance, so that they stay functional, so that they can still have a life and function in life.
100%. Yeah, I agree. I mean, the science sort of training and the time on the bike, that's the fundamental of why we do it. Most of us is being out on the bike and putting in the hard miles and working on those hard intervals and suffering and being uncomfortable. We find some gratification and enjoyment in that. And most of us enjoy also, like you mentioned, that systematic piece by piece sort of building through training and through goals. And that's one facet of it. That's the sort of science of it. And then there's also the art of it. And I would put the art of it into that balance and that family sort of realm. And I think really one of the things that has helped me is approaching that in a similar way to that I have the scientific part. And that is, there are maybe more variables. You don't know if that niece or nephew is going to be sick, or you can't always control how many wet willies they're going to give you. But I've been honest with myself about how important those times are to me, and then sort of systematically and methodically, built those times in, knowing that I can go and be present and enjoy it, and not be neurotically paranoid about about the little bit of immune system dysfunction, or about being on the edge, or missing an hour training here, or being on my feet an extra hour there. And that obviously varies through the seasons and through the years, and through different phases of goals and progression. But planning in it, and being deliberate with it, and also being honest with communication with my family, knowing what they can expect of me and what I'm going to expect of them, can help ease those times, and make them a little less traumatic, and hopefully make me a little less fragile, like you said.
I think that is really great to hear from someone at your level, that they have this perspective on things like, this is my job. And at the same time, I realize it is a job. It's extremely important, but sometimes family is more important. Taking the risk of being around somebody that I love because they might be sick, but I want to see them anyways, is important enough that I'm gonna take the risk, or maybe not even think about it as a risk, but just say, like, today this is more important to me. And having that ability to balance the priorities in your life and shift between them is great to hear. Sitting down with someone who is a pro and talking about life work balance might seem like the wrong approach, but I think what we're learning here is you've had to do this for a long time, even before you were a pro, in a sense, as you were heading in that direction. And therefore you've had to pick up on a lot of these things, and perhaps it's become second nature to you now. But our job today is to tease all of these things out of you, to shake them out of the trees, so to speak, and get all these really great nuggets of information, how you become an airport ninja, whatever the terms might be, or the phrases you might use for all these tricks and life hacks that you have to balance everything. But I'm looking forward to bringing out more of those.
Oh, that's really tricky. It's a work in progress. The first thing with me is a sort of acceptance that by proximity, I am going to be away from my family for a large part of the year, and I'm not going to have as much time with them and as much time as they would want with me. Prioritizing that line of communication and prioritizing staying in touch with them, which is challenging, I think, especially now with the culture and the tendency to just be sending text messages and just be updating people, whether it's family, friends, or strangers, what we're doing on via social media. Real, authentic, quality communication can go by the wayside. So that's something I'm still struggling with and challenging myself to do more. Sort of cut down on the quantity and just go for the quality a little more. But it's definitely a work in progress. And another thing is just being real on the expectation with my family. And they've my parents and my brother and my wife's family, they've been doing this alongside me and with me a long time, so they're no strangers to it. But I do sort of have to continuously remind them of the uncertainty in my program and what they can expect of me, and also what I want to expect from them. So I think being sort of honest and deliberate with what the time expectations are and the opportunities to see each other are is really important. Another thing I would say is I'm using. My family is part of my support network, and they do play a role in supporting me towards my goals, in addition to just being parents or brothers or friends as well. And I am relying on them as part of my inner circle and my support team. And I think discussing with them ahead of time the role they're going to sort of play in that support team, and when I'm going to rely on them and how I'm going to rely on them, I think that is important to sort of set that expectation and be realistic and be open to feedback from them if that's something that they're up for.
From my point of view, just to second what you said, and having now gone through the evolution of learning what it's like when there's a newborn in the house, to a 1-year-old, a 2-year-old, a very, very, very active 3-year-old, almost 4-year-old now. Communication is such an incredible thing, whether you have a child or not. Honestly, that you don't even have to have the child to know that communication is a fascinating part of a relationship, and such a significant part of any good relationship. And talking about, I need this now, or what do you need now? Trying to understand what's going on inside of people's minds and bodies in a given time, in a challenging and somewhat stressful time of your life. When you have a newborn child, you're learning a lot. Things are coming at you pretty quickly. You can talk to as many people as you want, but until you live it, you really don't have a great sense of what it's really going to entail. And so being able to sit down with your wife or husband or partner and explaining to them how much you love what you do, but how much you know that they're going to need in those situations, and just being, like you said, setting those expectations, not just for you, but for them, for the relationship as a whole, is critical.
Yeah, example I'm going to give of how important this the communication and the support is. I've worked with a lot of masters athletes who do have families and have a job, and so spouses aren't too happy if they're disappearing every Saturday all day to go and ride their bikes, understandably. So one of the things, and Chris can testify to this, one of the ways I coach athletes is I do a 2-3 weeks of fairly standard training, and then we have a really big fatiguing week where we do a 4-day block or a 5-day block, depending on the athlete, that includes the weekend. Then we take a rest week. There are physiological reasons why I do that, but a lot of that is actually about that family and training balance. If you're disappearing every weekend, your family has every right to be upset with you. But I found when I have my athletes go back to their significant others and say, once every 4 or 5 weeks, I want to have this weekend where I really go and kill myself. And the rest of the time, family comes first. And I tell my athletes that, love to get you out for a long ride on the Saturday or the Sunday, but if you got family things going on, that's fine, because we got our big week coming up. When they get to the big week, they've communicated it with their family. I even have them pick the dates that work for them with their family. Sometimes I've even seen it where the family actually becomes a bit of a cheerleader because they know it's coming. It's been communicated. It's not every weekend. And then you get to have this really fun kind of 4-day block where you just get to go and feel like a pro athlete.
Yeah, love that. We do that same thing. One of the extra layers of maybe being a professional is that oftentimes we can't count on those structured periodizations and those overload weeks and those rest weeks because our racing schedules are so much. I'm very well aware of how important those big blocks are, and even more so maybe those rest weeks. And our families, I think, rely on those heavily, and the expectation of them is really high. And I see it discussing, sitting around the dinner table with our teammates and my teammates and talking about what is going to happen during a rest week, or what they have planned, or how great it's going to be, or an off season. There's so much anticipation, and it's like this golden nugget that everyone's just striving for. But the challenge with us is oftentimes everything gets jumbled around, and that really creates that balance of family tough, because it's not just ourselves and our own athletic pursuit that is counting on this time. It's the other people in our lives that are as well. I can't tell you how many times I think I'm going to get a little rest block here, a rest week here, or finish this race and to be able to take a load off. And then sure enough, schedule gets changed, priorities get changed, and then it's back to the drawing board. So that, as a pro, that is one of the biggest challenges, to just keep rolling through that and keep adapting. And then really staying for us, staying healthy through it is such an immense challenge too. I can't tell you how many times we get to those rest days or that easy week or a little break in our season only to find that we're injured or sick. And then instead of being quality time, like you said, that needs to be devoted to the family, we're kind of just back on the clock in the recovery sense, monking out on the couch, drinking tea, trying to, recover in every way possible, as opposed to giving the family and the others in our lives that deserved attention that they've all been waiting for, and we've been waiting for too.
Okay, we got to call out that is a little pro moment, that just sitting on the couch and drinking tea. Anybody else would be like, yeah, sitting on the couch and eating Doritos and drinking beer.
We do that too. There's a time for that too.
Elite coach Colby Pearce, one of the newest members of the Fast Labs team, knows what the pro life is like, having both lived it and coached many top pros over the years. He has a lot to say about how hard it can be to balance that life.
Well, having coached, I don't coach a lot of World Tour pros, but I have certainly coached a few of them. And I also worked for the team for Garmin Sharp for a year in 2013 as part of their sports science program. And I can tell you that firsthand that's an easy sort of misconception to follow, is that professional athletes have really leisurely lives off the bike, or they're pampered, or that they have a lot of things taken care of for them. And the fact is that, I experienced this during my own racing stint. You sacrifice a lot. And I used to really struggle with the word sacrifice, because to me, it never felt like a sacrifice because it was my passion. Like Creed always says, my Creed always used to say, cycling almost chose me. First bike race I did, I felt like I got struck by lightning, to be honest. I was like, holy crap, I'm a bike racer now. This is it. I'm going home and shaving my legs. And that was when I was 14 years old. It was just it. My stepmom was like, whoa, what happened? But you follow this passion, right? And you just go all in on it. And other things, by definition, are left out of that equation, because you're always riding your bike. You're always tired. You're always training. And when you're not training, you're recovering. So things like, your friends are like, hey, you want to come over and have barbecue on Saturday afternoon at 4? I'll still be riding my bike. But didn't you start at 10 in the morning? Well, yes. And even if I get home at 4, I'm going to be on the couch, doing my Normatex and doing my ice bath, or, eating my recovery food or whatever. Like, I can't stand for 2 hours and chit chat. You give up a lot of things. You can't just have a project where you're going to just decide to nuke a weekend building a deck. Like, these are things that normal people do that cyclists do not do for decades of their lives, or at least a decade. And those, because so much of your life is consumed with training and racing. Now consider the World Tour Pro, or when I raced in Europe, you're traveling back and forth to another country. Now you got to set up another life in another country. Do you know how complicated that is? If you've never done it, you probably don't have an idea, but you're talking about work permits and foreign language barriers, and buying a couch and negotiating to find a mover to move the couch up the tiny little apartment stairs that they're all really super small in Girona. And then what do you do with the couch when the lease is up? If you're Alex, you put it on the balcony. Long story, but so there's living in a foreign country, dealing with foreign team dynamics. You have this really large plate of challenges because you've left your friends, you've left your family at home. Even if you have a wife or girlfriend who travels with you, then they're in a foreign country. And are they able to find work? More often not than so. And so all these challenges, these life challenges that aren't really evident to the outside observer, become quite polarizing, and just, they become big struggles for a lot of athletes. And a lot of athletes have gone over to Europe and said, this is it, I made it, I got my contract. And then they realize first-year Pro Tour contract is not that much money, especially when you consider all the additional living expenses of basically having a second apartment or a second place to live.
Right.
And the time and energy to get that set up. You're basically asking the athlete to move while they're training. Usually, that's how it works. And that's, man, I don't know the last time you guys moved. Trevor, you just moved recently. Like, moving is... I
lost a month of training because of that.
It's a major life disruption, right? Let alone if you have family and other things to deal with. Then the other misconception about Pro Tour cycling, and I'll say this with all affection towards the team, man, Pro Tour cycling teams are held together with super glue and duct tape. It's unbelievable.
Cycling is held together.
Even at the top. And I'm not disrespecting any of the mechanics or the team workers or soigneurs who work so hard, but it's just a fact. It's the way it is. And you get to the service course and you see what people are working with. And on the one hand, there's this massive pile of resources. On the other hand, there's like nothing. I know Pro Tour riders who have asked for their access to their time trial bikes, for example. Everyone assumes they've got race bikes and time trial bikes at home. Yeah. There are guys who show up to Tour de Suisse and have not ridden their TT bike for 4 months because they don't have one at home, because because their TT bike got broken down or changed to another rider to go do another early season race, because they're rotating bikes and they've got 3 programs going at all times. This is just one of many examples of how athletes struggle to get the right equipment at times. And you would just assume they're rolling in that stuff. And there are times when there are deep pools of resources. There are also equivalent times when the athlete's going, I've been riding the same pair of shoes for 9 months. And you're like, how is this even possible? And it just happens because the athlete is moving targets and they're dealing with sponsors, and they're working through the network of the team to try to get replacement shoes, et cetera, et cetera. So the stories never end in that respect. Then there's things like health insurance, or when you crash or get sick in a foreign country, and trying to figure all that out. Depending on what country you're in, that can either go really smoothly or incredibly poorly. There's the list of life challenges that a pro athlete has to deal with. They're astounding. And so it's easy to think that they've got a pampered life. They've always got massages and access to equipment and all the training tools they need. And in select cases or select examples, that can be the case. But more often than not, it's a real struggle. And you get to the top, and it's a classic example of, I've chased this as my dream my whole life, and now I'm here, but I didn't know what the dream actually was.
Now let's get back to our conversation with Brent Bookwalter.
I was going to add in that we did actually have quite a good conversation about something similar to this in our recent episode on season planning, where, for an amateur who has the luxury of really like placing family vacations first, you can work backwards. Once the vacation is planned, you can say, okay, that is the family time at the end of my racing block, and work backwards and figure out the training that fits into that, knowing that not only for your physiological self, so to speak, you'll get the rest period, but also after all the racing and time away from family, you'll get to be able to spend some time with the family and recharge in that way as well. So that discussion, I think, was something that we dovetails really nicely with this balancing discussion. So check that episode out.
There's nothing I like more when it's possible to give one of my master's athletes just a killer week right before they go and sit on the beach for 10 days.
Makes it feel even better. Makes it feel sweet. Yeah, we love that. We're as professionals, it's just so hard to anticipate that, and it's one of the biggest challenges, and that's one of the things I'll look forward to most when I'm not racing at this level is, like you just said, being able to actually plan a trip with those I want to be with the most and know that without a doubt it's not going to change or bend, and barring unforeseen catastrophes, won't be sick or hurt. It's pretty touch and go and always getting changed and moved around. And yeah, I can't thank my family enough for the patience that they have with me and that ever-changing schedule. It's quite a challenge.
I'm really happy to hear that. I sense a bit of jealousy in your voice that pros don't
100%.
Pros don't have it so as well as we think. We have the ability to plan our own vacations, and we know they won't change. That's amazing.
Yes, it is. Enjoy it. Relish those planning moments and know what's coming, because probably the guys in the hierarchy of the team that are up at the top, they have a little more security and soundness in that planning because their schedules are going to change a little less. But myself, as someone who's made a career of sort of being adaptable and versatile and slotted into a lot of different situations and race scenarios, my schedule's changing often.
I had a blast those years that I raced full time, but I will tell you, it was tough with that race and then try to rest before you get to the next race, and then you hop on a plane, go to the next race, and it's just that routine over and over again, just trying to keep your body functional, get to all the races. And you couldn't plan anything else. You couldn't do anything else. The only way I had known a summer had happened was because I had done the races that I knew were in July and August. It wasn't because I had actually enjoyed any of the summer. And it is nice to be able, I do remember the first year I really backed down going, oh, that's right. This is what a summer feels like.
That might be a good segue into taking a deeper dive into the balance of travel and training. We're talking about vacations here and travel in that respect, but you travel the world for your job in a sense. And so shall we dive into travel and training balance? How do you make that happen? Consistency, staying healthy, dealing with foreign beds and foreign food and the good and the bad of both of those things. And what can you offer us there on tips, Brent?
Oh, it's another huge challenge, and it's something that I love, and I'm very grateful and appreciative that I've had this chance to travel and see so many places, but it does become a burden. And man, I'll tell you how I miss my bed and miss being home and miss that consistency. So I think one of the big things is just accepting that travel is going to throw me some curveballs. Use that proper planning and accounting for different possibilities can go a long way to making my life easier and the travel less impactful on my training. But ultimately it is an area that, we have very little control of. So just accepting that, when I go into a travel block to a race, or when I'm traveling back to Europe, there's going to be some unforeseens and things I can't anticipate. And I got to sort of mentally and physically prepare for that, just like I would a big training session. That means getting the proper rest and lead up beforehand, using as many little hacks as I can with tons of hand sanitizer and compression socks and as good a nutrition and a little travel survival kit, and just sort of treating that big travel day just like you would a big training day.
What's inside that travel kit? I'm curious.
Oh man, yeah, I roll a pretty big backpacker carry-on bag that usually most of my teammates are laughing at because it's so heavy. But yeah, I want to be prepared. I want to definitely have a bit of a reserve of some food and some snacks and some water in there. Get stuck on the runway for too long and you're starving and dehydrated, and that's not doing anyone any good. So there's definitely that bit of a nutrition component. Definitely always have the compression socks on. Like I said, definitely using the hand sanitizer, being really vigilant with just trying not to touch my face, touch my eyes, being aware of all those surfaces I touch, and not being too crazy about it. It's always inevitable you're gonna touch them, but just going through it aware and doing my best to mitigate as much of that danger as possible.
I heard that turning on the air vent above you is actually a good thing because it creates a zone where, like a negative pressure zone over you, so that it wards off some of the stale air that might be in the cabin of an airplane. That could be a total myth.
Yeah, I've heard that too. I guess it probably depends who you asked. If you've asked some of my European teammates that I've had through my career, most of them would default to saying any sort of air blowing on you at any point in time is a major risk for infection, and you better get that buff or that turtleneck or scarf up around your neck, or you're gonna catch a cold.
Euro myths are so awesome. I love it. They think they're gonna get sick if they have a plant growing in their house or something. They have such strange thoughts on these things.
There's some rituals, but yeah, whatever works. I mean, I think the takeaway is, find out what works for you and stick to it, and then allow that to give you some confidence and bolster you and be empowered, knowing that, what, I'm doing everything I can in my control. Now I can sort of just, go through the process and know that I'm doing my best and controlling what I can control. And after that, who knows what's going to happen.
Yeah, the placebo effect can be pretty strong, even if it's not just having the confidence that you're doing what you can to reduce the risks. And we're talking about this like we're talking about deadly diseases, but we're talking about, minor things relative to what's in the world. But
yeah, but they have a big impact.
Yeah, exactly.
Really big impact. Yeah, I mean, watching pro cyclists travel to a key race when they're super lean and coming off a big training load and have a massive part of their season riding on the races that are about to happen. We're not the most relaxed, little neurotic. I'll confess another piece of survival too. I do have, I don't even think I ever opened it this year, but I do have like a little face mask in my little like travel kit, just in case, you get throwback a person that is just coughing up a storm funny. And there's no extra seats. I'd rather have that little bit of a hospital germ mask to throw on for a couple hours of a flight than, know that they're coughing all over me.
I was so excited when I got to the center and they started teaching us how to travel, because I grew up as a bit of a hypochondriac. And I was like, wait a minute, my neuroses is actually a benefit now?
Yeah, right. Exactly.
So the only things I would throw into the travel mix here of suggestions I have that really worked, for me at least. One is have something that's comfortable for you. I always traveled with my pillow. I found I could sleep on almost any bed as long as I had my pillow. That was just a bit of comfort, a bit of home for me. And it was worth finding the space to be able to fit that in my bag. Other people might have other comfort things, but those little things can really help. The other recommendation I would have is, and this is going to sound strange, but let travel affect you. I used to do this early in my career, and I've seen athletes do this. They try to map out their training as if the travel didn't exist. So they'll map out, in a week that they're traveling, they'll map out their plan as if they were at home the whole time. And the fact of the matter is, crossing time zones, getting on a plane for 5 hours, these things do affect you, and modify your training. You accept the fact that, yeah, the travel is going to affect you a bit, and trying to train at your normal volume, your normal intensity might not be the best approach. And also keep in mind, being off the bike for 4 days isn't going to kill you.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, I think it's an important point. I used to treat the travel day as a rest day, so I would try to smash myself leading right up to that rest day, but you're leaving yourself vulnerable, because then you're maybe a little bit compromised, your immune system's a little bit taxed, and then you expose yourself to an environment where there are a lot of germs around, and it's kind of the opposite of what you want to be doing. You don't want to go into a travel day, especially if it's a transatlantic or trans-Pacific flight, completely fatigued and vulnerable.
Look, I had an athlete, this was last week. She was getting ready to travel for Thanksgiving. So we're recording at the end of November right now. And my instructions, we kind of mapped out a week, but my instructions to her is, look, do what you can. You're traveling at the end of the week. I know you have a lot of work to do. So if it's not a great week, it's not a great week. It's November. Season doesn't start till May. So she had threshold intervals planned for the Friday, Thursday or Friday. She was flying on the Sunday. She didn't get the intervals in. And I get this text from her on Saturday night saying she's just going to bed. It's like 11 o'clock at night. She goes, but I know I missed my thresholds, but don't worry. I'm getting up at 4 a.m. so I can do the threshold work before I get on the plane. And thankfully I saw it right away and just text her back. So I'm like, so your plan, even though I said it's not a critical week, is to go and completely immunocompromise yourself and then go get on a plane for 3 hours with a bunch of people right at the start of flu season. Does that sound like the best idea?
No.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely not. That's brutal. But we all, I mean, like we were saying earlier, is we're all addicted to that process of we want to get it done and we want to be accountable to our training and ourselves. And I hate giving up on a workout, and I hate, kicking a workout out of my training program. The tendency is to let it feel like a failure. And I struggle with that all the time for as long as I've been training and doing this striving towards this balance. It's still something that I struggle with, and it's something I see the other pros that I'm around struggle with. That feeling, you're not alone when you're going through that struggle. And I think that's one of the reasons it's important to have a coach and have someone with some outside perspective, guide and provide a little insight. But I definitely agree with you, Trevor, in that the pillow's big. Another thing I do is just in that same note of familiarity. I think anything that you can bring along with you in traveling to make the space a little yours. I'm definitely a room brew coffee maker, and I have my little coffee setup that I bring with me all through the world, every race I go to just about. And it gives me a few minutes every morning to sort of set myself and know that I have something that I can expect that's the same, and it's my time. It's not in the team schedule. And yeah, maybe I wake up a few minutes early for it, but that's my choice, and it's empowering to have a little bit of control and familiarity in that. I think that goes a long way as well.
So if you've been listening to the show lately, you know we have expanded. In the next few weeks, we're adding a couple shows to our lineup, hosted by super coaches Grant Holicky and Colby Pearce. But something I've been really excited about is the camps we're going to be offering this spring and summer. Back when I joined Team Rio Grande in 2011, Dr. Andy Pruitt did one of these scientific camps with the team, and he modeled it after what he did with Pro Tour teams. At the end of the camp, he had a talk with us and basically said, you guys are pros and you should feel like pros. And I'll tell you, that camp made us feel that way. I still haven't forgotten that first camp and the wow impact it had on me. It was a lot of fun. It was incredibly informative. And I went on to have my second best year of my life at the age of 40. I think the camp and the approach that Dr. Pruitt taught us was a huge part of that. So I continued these camps when I managed Team Rio Grande, and it has always been a dream of mine to make this type of camp available to everyone. And we have partnered with the University of Colorado Sports Medicine Performance Center to make these camps a reality.
So if you're as excited about these camps as we are, go to our website, www.fastlabs.com. Check us out. We have 3 camps in 2020. One the last few days of April, first few days of May, one in June, and one in August. Check out fastlabs.com. Enter FastLabs2020 as the discount code and receive $500 off a purchase at this Performance Experience training camp.
So Brent, I know work means something a little bit different than it does for the rest of us. Work is racing your bike. Work is training to race your bike, and work is taking care of your body. But some of these rules, some of these tips that you have on balancing work and training in life are applicable to everybody. So let's dive into that one now. For the person that has a 40-hour per week day job, they might think, well, what is Brent going to be able to tell me about this? But let's see what you have to offer here, Brent.
Yeah, maybe nothing. No, I do have it good in that, I can prioritize my recovery and staying off my feet and make nutrition a priority and build my day around my rides. That wasn't always the case. I have had various jobs at different times in my life, especially when I was younger. And I think one of the things I learned through that time was just to not underestimate the toll and stress that work would have on my training and racing. Just like the travel and just like the family, it comes back to some pretty fundamental anticipation of what that toll is. And ideally, again, that's done with a coach and a support network of friends and other family and coworkers helping you to just be real on what that stress is like.
So something I want to throw in here, this is actually going to flip it around a little bit. This is a struggle for people who decide to go pro and are very early in their careers. Something happens, and it's not a good thing, when cycling or your sport goes from being your hobby to your work. Because when it's your hobby, it's your release. It's the thing that you do to get away from what stresses you. And I've seen a lot of athletes who get serious hit this phase where all of a sudden now cycling is their work. And it's a real struggle for them because they suddenly don't have a stress release. And that's part of it. And Brent, please call me out on this one, but that's part of the reason I say there's no pro out there that just rides their bike and sits on the couch, because you just can't survive if your work and your hobby all wrapped up in one and you have nothing else going on.
Yeah, definitely. I think that tricky relationship of that hobby and that passion becoming our work is something that I think about a lot and I'm up against. And I love riding my bike. And first and foremost, I like riding my bike probably more than racing it. And I'd like to think it's something that I'll always do, but it does the relationship I have with riding does change, because it isn't just about having fun out there, and it isn't just about chasing a goal that I'm doing for myself. It's about, existing within a team network and being accountable to my teammates and our sponsors, and that expectation of pressure of trying to accomplish something and having to, frankly, and having that pressure that, failing is not an option. So yeah, that changes the relationship of it. Yeah, once again, I think that's something I'll look forward to when I'm no longer racing professionally, is just getting back to the pure sort of joy of riding and not having that sort of blurring of mixing passion and profession. That said, it's something I'm grateful for and really appreciative of, and try to stay aware of that and know that it's not something I'll get to do forever.
That's a good way to look at it.
One of the things we haven't really spelled out, and it really applies to each of these main categories we're talking about here, is the fact that there's training stress and then there's other stress. And while there isn't a formula to say work stress equals, some component thereof training stress, or is equivalent to this amount of training stress, or travel stress is equivalent to this amount of training stress, there's no formula for that. But the point is, all of that stress accumulates, and you have to take that into consideration when you're talking about how much training you should do, how much rest you need. That has a lot to do with how you make all of this balancing act work out properly in your advantage.
Yeah, there's all these factors in our lives that are applying stress: work and our family and the travel and training, obviously, and they're all sort of taking us up to our capacity. The way I sort of view it is like I need to do things also to give back to my body and to give back to myself. So whether that's prioritizing sleeping an extra hour, or taking a nap, or incorporating more meditation, or making sure I'm going to focus on my diet more, get a massage. There's all these things that, we're usually just focused on the things that are putting us in the negative stress, down, 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 down. But eventually we got to give something back to our bodies and ourselves as well. Treat those as sort of positive points, if you will, and use those to bolster ourselves back up.
It's not unlike thinking about it as if you are an accountant's perspective on yourself. If you keep making withdrawals, you're going to go into a bad place pretty quickly. If you make a bunch of withdrawals, put in a deposit, another withdrawal, another deposit, then you're going to keep that account in balance more so than if you just keep draining it down and down and down, and then all of a sudden, I gotta put a deposit in there, or else I'm gonna be bankrupt here.
To flip this around, what you're talking about is that balance between stress and having to release. Don't turn training into a second job. Don't turn it into another source of stress. Most of us are doing this because it's something we're passionate about and really enjoy. And you need to keep that. If you have a stressful job and then you're stressing about your training, you get really out of balance. In some ways, see the training not as a sacrifice that you're making, that you're trying to balance, but as potentially something that you really need. I personally had that experience back when I started my graduate work. I was a full-time student. I was teaching. I had a coaching business. And I remember that first fall, I had about 2 weeks where I didn't do any exercise. I was so busy studying and working that's all I did. And at the end of that, we had a holiday party for our department. So I went to the house, walked in the door. One of the other students said hi to me, and I did, I'm sure, the equivalent of just sitting there with my mouth flopping around, and I couldn't actually form a sentence. And I was there about a minute before I was like, I am so out of balance right now. I actually can't talk to people. I can't function. And I had to leave the party. And after that, I just went, I can't go 2 weeks without having my stress release. I have to ride my bike. That's what it is for me now.
Been there.
Yeah, and I think that brings up the an idea about sort of compartmentalizing things, whereas we're talking about balancing things, and part of being able to do that is when you're at work, focusing there; when you're on your ride, focusing there, trying not to let them erode one another. Daydreaming is a pretty amazing thing, and you could do that to some degree, but you don't want to obsessively think about your rides when you're working, or vice versa. Who would actually think about work when they're riding besides Trevor?
Are you thinking about the other day?
Yeah, I'm thinking about the other day.
Chris and I were on the same bike path riding, and I biked right by him and didn't even recognize him because I was deep in thought about work.
It was funny and a little bit troubling. I got to be honest with you, Trevor. I pulled over to the side of the trail, and I kept looking back thinking, there's just no way that this guy I've known for 6 years just rode past me and didn't recognize me. And then finally Trevor turned around and came up to me, and I could tell immediately, like, this dude was deep in thought, and he's having a conversation with me right now, but I think half of his brain is still deep in thought, so I'm just going to let him go on his way.
That's pretty much the way it was.
The bike is good for that, though. It is. I've had to work on that compartmentalizing a lot lately, and with the guidance of some trained psychologists and mental trainers, because it's really important for me to, when I throw my leg over my bike, to really be functional and switching to that compartment and holding myself to a very high level of accountability and executing my my work and my intervals, and also enjoying it. That's part of it too, taking a minute to look around. But then knowing, especially in different times of the year, if I'm going into that family space or that other workspace or working on another project, that I have to deliver the same attention and focus to that, switching and keeping myself accountable to that. My 2 cents or just guidance would be that doesn't just happen naturally. Like I've had to train and work and try to appreciate some awareness for that. It's not easy to it's not always natural for me to bounce around to those different compartments and actually stay in them. So it's a constant work in progress. And you go in a little deeper, I would say, it's the same even with a little bit of a social setting. It's like when I show up with my teammates, I have to sort of put myself in that team compartment then. And now I'm pro cycling Brent, and I'm teammate Brent, and stay in that compartment, stay present. When I switch back to my family, or when I'm out on the bike by myself in a training session, to move around. And it doesn't mean those aren't bleeding together somewhat. I think that's always inevitable. It's helped me to have a little awareness of that and view it a little more visually like that. So I don't know if that can be helpful for others, but it has been for me.
Is there a particular trick that you use, a mantra or a phrase that you try to keep in mind when you're trying to switch between these compartments? What is the work with the sports psychologist or the psychologist been able to teach you about how to go between those 2 or 3 compartments, 4 compartments?
Yeah, many. It varies kind of depending on what is currently happening with training and with life. But the biggest component of it is just a sense of awareness and sort of mindfulness of those thoughts and those pressures and those feelings in my mind or my body of coming and going, and just being able to sort of like recognize them and note them, and then act on them if needed, or if not, just pass them off. Sometimes I'd say like a little bit of visualization, like I said, actually moving around, putting myself in different places or compartments, if you will, helps. And I think, you can use keywords or triggers to do that. That's going to really just, I think, depend on the individual, and everyone has their sort of way to do that. But I think the endeavor of searching and feeling that out and having someone help you do that is important and can be impactful.
Grant Holicky, a coach with Forever Endurance, also knows a lot about life as a pro. He shared many of our feelings about what happens when your passion becomes your work.
One of the big things that's starting to come into all professions and industry now is having this understanding of work-life balance, and that we're going to get more out of work when our life's in balance. And it's a little bit of a fall away from this idea of just get it all done, get the work done, go, 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 go. We go through this a lot with coaches at all times. Of coaches always want to be available for their athletes. They always want to be around. They feel like they need to be there all the time, but when they're burning the candle at all ends, they're not a very good coach anymore. They're not making good choices. So everybody needs to have that place where they're able to step away from their sport or their profession and do something they love and recharge. And as for professionals, I think that's crucial. We talk about a lot with the cross group, having fun and making fun of each other and really enjoying what we're doing. There's this idea that being a professional athlete is great because your hobby's your job. Well, it's not your hobby anymore. It's your job. So when you can find ways to really enjoy your work and enjoy what you're doing, you're just going to be a much more productive member of society, A, and secondly, a much better professional at what you do. And so I think that's crucial with everybody in every walk of life, every profession. But in some ways, sports is even more important because you're defined as a person by your success in your sport. And being careful to understand that other people may define you that way. You can't define yourself that way, or the rest of your world kind of falls away.
I love that you brought that up, because when I've coached athletes who are trying to go pro, one of the things I talk to them about is exactly what you just said. I go, you just lost your hobby.
Yeah.
So now you need a new hobby.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting too, how many high level amateurs, this is always an expression that I loved was, if I only could quit my job and pursue this full time, I would be this good, or I would be that good, or something like that. And I'll draw back from my life personally. I'll talk about it with Max's life. I'll talk about it with a lot of these guys. They were better when they were in school. They were better when their life was structured. I was far better with a full-time job and trying to race professional triathlon on the side than I ever was if I had gotten rid of that job. I'm a far better cross racer now with a 4-year-old and a 1-year-old than I ever was when I had no kids. My whole life is structured, but so's my off time. So's my time with my family. So's my time with my friends. So's those other things. And that's crucial.
Now let's get back to our conversation with Brent Bookwalter.
Well, let's talk about something that, we've touched upon in a few different ways throughout the episode, but let's focus in on it just a bit more and talk explicitly about it, which is the mental side of this, the staying positive, staying strong mentally so that you can make all of this work.
This is an area of constant pursuit of improvement and performance for me, and an area that I've recognized, more in like the second half of my career as potential to improve. I'm seeing deliberate work here from my peers more often implemented into the training plan and the regime. So I think this is an area that undoubtedly most people can improve performance, balance, and well-being. This is probably an entire podcast in itself, so we could really get off into the weeds here. Maybe this is redundant, but I'd say, commit some time, resources, and effort into sort of creating a mental training plan, just like a physical one. Strategize, plan, learn, grow, and identify some strict tricks and coping mechanisms and practices that work for you. So whether that's working with a psychologist, doing some meditation, some visualization, some self-talk, etc., have some appreciation and respect for that as a facet of training and progress and balance in itself. That's definitely helped me. Another thing I would say is that just to find, for me, I find my space and my place, even if it's just for a few minutes a day. So it can be amidst a crazy travel day, or it can be walking outside when I'm at a family gathering for 5 minutes, but just giving myself a few seconds to just breathe, refocus, recenter, and just process. Past that, I'd say you get a coach, or at least enlist a friend. This is probably going to be someone other than the person who's telling you how many watts to do. For me, that's definitely the case. Sometimes I think coaches often provide a lot of psychological support and mental and positivity training. But to be fair, we often need to look in additional places and turn over more stones, enlist others as well than just our normal physiological coaches.
I really like hearing you talk about this as a key component to training. It's such an underappreciated, often ignored area that can significantly improve not just what this episode is about, the balance, but performance too. I mean, thinking about the different aspects of what it takes to get to your level, you really need to tap into everything. But the same applies to every amateur out there. If all they do are their intervals, that's great. That's going to see some amount of progress, or going to help them achieve some amount of progress. But if they just leave the whole mental component on the table, then not only is their life and work balance going to potentially suffer, their performance is too. So I love hearing you talk about it as a critical component here. And, honestly, I think people are intimidated by it because people don't like to think about these things to some degree. But honestly, and this is just me, I find it really fun, really rewarding, and this great expanse to see improvement in yourself. So focusing on it, spending some time there is really rewarding. And I would encourage people to, like you said, look at it as a component of your training and sit down and either with somebody or just, there's books, there's resources that you can tap into and really see a lot of progression here. And it can be really fun and rewarding.
I guess the last thing I would just say is that I appreciate being given the chance to chime in here, but I am no means an expert in this stuff, and whether it's the cycling related stuff or the balance with family or the travel or the other work that is sure to come at other points in my life. I'm a student and I'm still figuring it out, and I think a little appreciation and respect that we're all just sort of trying to figure it out and do our best is an important concept and sort of note that I feel is worthwhile to sit on for a second.
15-time cyclocross national champion Katie Compton wouldn't have had such a long career if she hadn't devoted time and energy to staying mentally strong and balanced. Let's hear some of her thoughts.
I think it's because I listen to my body and I listen to my moods and I think about how I sleep. And you get to the point where I think the amount of years I've been doing it and the amount of miles on my legs, I'm allowed to kind of get away with doing a little bit less because I put so much time in when I was younger. I can have that better balance where I know how much intensity I need to do. I know how much recovery it takes. I know when I can do a high volume. That's all just been, I think, through a lot of seasons of racing my bike and knowing what is too much and then what is not quite enough. And then just knowing that, if I'm going to have, a couple down months, it's going to come around. And I think you don't notice that, you don't believe that until you go through so many periods of the ups and the downs, knowing that you are going to come out the other end. It's just a matter of when and how quickly. Yeah, it's not easy, but I think once you understand that if you don't dig your hole that deep and you stay more balanced, you actually do better and you're happier as an athlete and you're usually more successful than constantly chasing, not getting enough recovery, not hanging out with your friends, not enjoying your life, because when you skip out on those things, you burn out quickly too. Part of the reason why I can do it for so long is because I do spend time with doing other things, or my friends are getting together for something and I had something else planned. I'm like, you know what, I'm gonna go hang with friends because life's too short. So I try to keep everything in perspective where I want to be a good bike racer. I want to be successful at what I do, but I'm also not going to sacrifice a fun life just so I can win a bike race. And I think that's helped me kind of maintain balance and kind of keep perspective on kind of the priorities in my life and what's going to keep me happy as a person and an athlete.
All right, let's finish up with our take-homes.
Brent, you're a novice here, something you're not pro at, which is our take-homes, which we give every guest 60 seconds to encapsulate everything that we've addressed and maybe everything that they've learned up to this point in their life. This is a huge task for you. You've got 60 seconds to give it to us now. So take it away with your take-homes.
60 seconds. Yeah, rough. I would say an understanding that we're all on this process and we're all on this journey, and it is a constant, ever-changing work in progress, and what has worked in the past yesterday might not work today. So continuing to evolve, continuing to adapt, at the same time being deliberate, being focused, using the resources we have and what's at our disposal to maximize and plan and use everything that we have at our fingertips, not being afraid to lean on those around us and get help when we need it. Understand that as much as we work at something, there's always something that we can learn from someone else, and never be afraid to stop learning.
So Trevor, 60 seconds. You've done this so many times before, you could do it in your sleep. Tell us, what are your take homes from today's episode?
So there's a reason, instead of bringing in a time manager to talk about balancing life with or training with work and family and all these things in life, there's a reason we brought in a pro. This belief that a pro's life is just training and sitting on the couch, it couldn't be further from the truth. From my experience, actually, the training is the easy part. The hard part, and what I've seen in more careers, is finding that balance, both mentally and in terms of time management and work. It can be really, really tough. And one thing I have seen in the pros that are successful is they get really good at figuring out those rocks. What's really important and what can be sacrificed, and staying focused on that. And I think that's something, if there's anything that I learned from my years racing full time that I find really beneficial now that cycling is just a hobby and I actually have a real job, is that focus, is that ability to say, these are my rocks, I need to really work on these, and here's how I fit it all together. Chris?
Well, I emphasized the importance of communication pretty early in the episode. I think it's worth repeating here. And by that, I mean, communicating not only with everyone around you, but with yourself about what you need. With your partners, it can be a positive or a negative thing, but hopefully through communication, you can figure out a way forward. That is, on the positive side, say, hey, I'm gonna do these races this season, and let's figure out a way to have our family weekends and some race weekends, and let's just plan it and set expectations there. And then if, on the negative side, I don't want to avoid it, but some people do struggle to ride as much as they want because maybe their spouse doesn't, or their spouse, feels like they're taking advantage of the situation or something like that. But sitting them down and communicating that before it turns into something worse, and communicating how much you either love it or need it or both, and trying to figure out ways to maybe do it together more, or do other things together, so that you can each do your own things individually that you love to do. So just talking about it with those that are important to you is so critical to the balancing act that we're talking about here.
So, Brent, got to finish the show by saying that you have shared a lot of wisdoms with us over the years. Today was certainly no exception, and it was way too long before we got you on the show as our primary guest. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, guys. I always enjoy the show, and it's an honor to just be amongst the other esteemed and knowledgeable and insightful guests that you've had. So thanks for putting me in that great circle.
Absolutely. That's awesome to hear. Thank you.
That was another episode of Fast Talk. As always, we love your feedback. Email us at fasttalk@fastlabs.com. Subscribe to Fast Talk on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, SoundCloud, and Google Play, or anywhere you prefer to find your podcasts. Be sure to leave us a rating and a review. The thoughts and opinions expressed on Fast Talk are those of the individual. For Brent Bookwalter, Colby Pearce, Grant Holicky, Katie Compton, and Trevor Connor, I'm Chris Case. Thanks for listening.